Check one, check two. Check one, check two. About to get started in a second. Hope everybody's having a great Sunday. So just make sure it's looking decent on my phone. There it is. We're looking good. So as you can see, we're going over networking and server attacks, which is a standard chapter. Once again, we'll flow through and make it happen. I guess I'm looking good there. So let's get it. So I think it's SecurityPlus. Going over chapter 5, network server attacks. So if anybody got any questions, just drop them in the box. I'm sure we'll go back and forth. So let's get it. Okay, let's see. My audio is, see what's going on. Let me see my stream health. No, I'm good there. What's up, Game Over? Glad you can make it. Any questions in the box? We're about to get started. I did a video on a couple things. Let's figure it. Look it up real quick. Trying to get motivated on a Sunday. The weird thing was I did a video on a hacker gets returned 500K in Bitcoin. I don't think we should be paying hackers money unless we actually pay them to do a red team or a penetration test. Somebody hacks in your site and you actually pay them. You're actually incentivizing hackers to actually keep hacking and actually we're actually paying the hackers to do bad things. So I don't think we should. Even if they return your stuff, I don't know if I still would have paid them a fee for actually that. The other one I did was Samsung could actually remotely shut off your computer. Shut off your TV once you hooked it to the internet. So obviously there's rootkits or something for them to communicate without Samsung's TVs. They saying if somebody stole your TV, they can actually remotely shut it off like it's a phone. But if they can remotely shut off your your TV, a hacker can actually remotely shut off your TV, cut on your webcam. There's actually speakers on there too, so I'm sure Samsung has all that hooking up to a centralized server. So I don't know if that's good or bad. So I'm actually not feeling Samsung when that information. So there's two recent videos I did on that. Do not incentivize hackers to hack. Let's get started. This is actually an introduction to computer security course. I actually teach this at a local university. I just want to send it out to people so they can get used to the industry, kind of get their feet wet. And as we go through these slides, if anybody has any questions, of course, ping me. If you got any general questions on anything, just put them in the chat and I answer them. The only question I never answer is how much money do I make? Anything else, we up for grabs. So let's get it. So network-based attacks. Everybody knows what networking is. Of course, the 800-pound gorilla networking, Cisco. People really never think of the internet. Basically, it's a big network, right? There's routers out there. There's switches out there. They're controlled by large companies. At the core fundamentals of that, it's just networking, right? So there's several attacks that targets a network or a process that relies on network. These attacks can be grouped into two: interception attacks and poison attacks, right? Those are the two main categories of attacks on network. Some attacks designed to intercept network communication. The three of the most common interception attacks are man-in-the-middle attacks, man-in-the-browser attacks, and replay attacks. Right. So for my guys going to networking, Cisco, of course, is an 800-pound gorilla. There's a ton of great guys out there. Network Bruh, Dewan. There's a ton of network guys out there that's making moves in networking, right? So the man-in-the-middle attack. A man-in-the-middle attack interception of legitimate communications, forging a fictitious response to the sender. Two computers are sending and receiving data with the computer between them. The man-in-the-middle could occur between two users. However, many man-in-the-middle attack are between a user and a server. Right. So if you're in a server, you paying your credit card or doing your banking. If I'm a man-in-the-middle attack and I can see that information, or just grabbing and passing on, right, then I can get your bank account numbers, your credit cards, even your passwords, right, if you don't encrypt those correctly. So man-in-the-middle intercepting keys. So that shows you it. Bob sends me his public key. He makes a public key. Alice makes a public key to the man-in-the-middle. He takes it. He takes Bob's public key. Bob sends it back. 1, 2, 3, 4. The attacker in the middle, the brown guy, he intercepts Bob's accounts and sends Alice his account number. So now when Alice pays that money, she's putting it in the wrong bank account, right? So at the end, you see he stole the public key. So now he can intercept Bob's information. He takes Bob's account from 1, 2, 3, 4. Then he sends it to 6, 7, 8, 9. So when Alice pays that money, right, she's going to pay it not to Bob, but to the brown guy in the middle. Game over. You're never going to disrespect. Let's read. No disrespect, but it's easy to learn hacking. Then turn corporate due to fact of psychological duality, meaning the feeling of power. Will that help you learn faster? No disrespect, but learn hacking in turn. Maybe. My only issue with hacking, which is penetration testing and red team, from hacking being from a bad perspective, you get the power. But if you're talking about in a corporation, we never have that talent inside. So penetration testing and red team, those are actually done by corporations, so there's less jobs for that. So I actually do hacking kind of as a blue team, red team guy. But what I do is, for my job is, and if you look on my channel, I talk about hardening. So once I harden the server, harden the database, harden the infrastructure, then I have to test it. So at some level, I do have to understand what a man-in-the-middle attack. I do have to understand how to do a penetration test. I do have to understand how to secure keys or change keys, right? So even if you're on the, I call blue team hardening, setting it up, architecture, at some level you do have to test your infrastructure, right? But no, that's a good report. Psychologically, and like you said, the duality, it just depends on how you feel as a person. I feel as blue team, I'm doing a heavy lifting, right? I got to set it up. I got to harden. I got to work with the database team. I got to work with the sysadmin. I got to set that all up. The hacker just has to find one little flaw in the stuff I set up and they win, right? It's kind of, I don't want to relate it to terrorism, right? We're not talking about like that, but the terrorists only have to be successful one time. I've got to set it up and be successful every day, every hour, every year, year after year. If I fail, right, my boss ends up on the news, right? We're in the news. We failed. You stole our data, right? So I always tease the red team. I'm like, dude, you only have to be successful in one little bit. I got to set up the whole architecture. I got to make sure everything's hardened from the whole setup. Like I said, web server, app server, database, the Cisco guys, the Linux guys, the Microsoft SQL, the Active Directory guys. I got to make sure all of that's locked down, right? All of that's on me, right? All that's my grind, right? So we're going to talk about man in the browser. MTB attacks intercept communication between parties to steal or manipulate data. Occurs between browser and underlying computer. Attacker usually begins with a Trojan infection of the computer, installing an extension to the browser. When the browser is launched, the extension is activated. The extension waits for a specific web page, which the user enters the account number and password to a financial institution. When a user clicks submit, the extension captures all the data. Then he steals it, even when he may even modify some data. So when you work in a browser, even apps, when you start downloading apps to your phone or putting extensions to your browser, you got to verify each one of those apps and each one of those extensions. Any one of those could be actually a Trojan horse, an attacker, or let's take it to the highest level. It could be a nation state. If you look in, especially Android's app store, there was a lot of nation states putting apps in there to actually follow you, track your data, and making your data available to a host, North Korea, South Korea, Russia, right? So you got to check your app store and check your setup and check your browser settings, right? So since I do a lot of federal work, we don't let you put any extensions into the browser, right? We control that actually from Microsoft GPOs. So to put a browser in, you actually got to sign a key so we know we okay that app to be in your browser, right? We don't trust any sources, computer hacks, right? We think everybody's trying to hack us. Advantages of the browser attack. Most attacks are distributed through Trojan browser extension, making it difficult to recognize malicious code that has been installed. We don't let you put browser extensions in, so we don't have to worry about it. An effective browser may remain dormant for months until triggered by user visited to a targeting website. Software resides exclusively within a web browser, making it difficult for even anti-malware software to detect it. Right. So when you put that extension into your browser, now your anti-malware said, okay, they connected to your browser, so it must be good. That's true, game over. They had more sin. Is that an app that captures sniffing? Yep, that's true. There's a whole bunch of apps that can capture sniffing. If you're on Linux, if you just do a TCP dump, that'll show you everything going through your network from a Linux perspective. I do it. Bad guys do it for sniffing. I do it from a compliance standpoint because if I do TCP dump on your Linux, that's going to let me know if your data is encrypted. If I see data coming across and I can't read it, 99% of it's encrypted. If I see data coming across that I can read, I know we don't have our encryption keys set up and we're not doing encryption correctly. Replay attack. Attacker makes a copy of a transmission before sending it to the original recipient. Users copy at a later time. Usually you do that, you capturing your login credentials. Methods to prevent replay attacks. Both sides can negotiate and create a random key that is valid for a limited period or specific. Use a timestamp in all your messages and reject any messages that fall outside of the normal window. Right, so if I'm a hacker and you send this transaction across the internet, if I grab it in this username and password, if I replay it on my machine, right, it's going to log me on as you, right? So if I look at the date, like they said, the date of the transaction, and that date is 8 hours later than the normal time, I know to reject it, right? That's out of order transaction, right? So that's the things to deal with replay. Poisoning, the act of introducing a substance that harms or destroys. 3 types of attacks of injection poison into a normal network process to facilitate an attack. ARP poisoning, DNS, and privilege escalation. Right, we're going to go over the other 2. The big one I see usually when I'm out in the wild is privilege escalation, right? How am I going to become a regular user, then I'm going to become root or admin on a database, right? Professor, you have to work triple time than the average person. That's true, game over, but I'm getting old, man. Y'all gonna have to step up. But I do work. I actually enjoy the grind, man. This is something I do. And the cool thing and the bad thing about it sometimes is in this industry, you have to continuously learn, right? So now I've been on my AWS grind. I'm actually start doing those security checks for AWS. I'm gonna do those online. I'm actually gonna set up a AWS network. Talk about VPC, which is networking in there. Security groups, which is their logical firewalls. Network gateway. How do you get it to connect to the internet and be secure? How to spin up a database and do those checks on the AWS database, right? So we're gonna move this, which is kind of on-prem. All that still applies to the cloud. How are we gonna make that leap to the cloud? Let's get the cloud bag. Let's get the cloud money. But yeah, game over. You gotta keep grinding out here, even when you old. Let's talk about ARP, address resolution protocol from networking guys. That's standard stuff for IP address for a known, but the MAC address is not sending computer ARP packet to determine the MAC address. The MAC address is stored in ARP cache for future references. All computers hear the ARP reply, also cache. ARP poisoning relies on the MAC spoofing, which imitating another computer by means of changing the MAC address. So when you hear people talk about MAC addresses, it's good to say the MAC address on this machine can only connect to this network. But I always remember a MAC address can be spoofed, all right? So we need to do layers. We need to hopefully have a static IP with the MAC address, pair those together with MFA, right? Multi-function it. So when you check your computer IP address, you take your computer MAC address, you make sure that PC or workstation is actually, they call it conditional access, which means it's owned by the corporation, right? Then you call their person's phone. So that's 4 levels of security, right? When you talk about getting into an actual system. Once again, what can you do with ARP poisoning? Stealing the data. An attacker can substitute their own MAC address and steal data intended for another device. Prevent internet access. An attacker can substitute an invalid MAC address for the network gateway so that new users can access external network. We talked about the man in the middle. Device can be set up to receive all communications by substituting a MAC address. And denial of service, a valid IP address of a target can be substituted with an invalid MAC address, causing all the traffic destined for the target to fail. So with ARP poisoning, there's a million ways to, not a million ways, but there's a lot of ways to steal data, make the data go somewhere where it should not. All right, so we're going to actually walk through what that DNS poisoning will look like. I need my handheld to get started, to be honest. What you trying to get started in game over? You trying to get into cybersecurity? DNS poisoning. DNS is domain name system. It's the current basis of a name resolution to IP address. DNS poisoning substitute DNS address to redirect the computer to another device. 2 locations for DNS poisoning, local host and external DNS. So if you look at that sample host file in any Linux box, if I know that that box is internal to our network, I'll just put it in the local host, right? So now I don't have to go to the DNS server, look stuff up. So local host, so you see it right there, 161.618.20 is WKU. It's educational, Western Kentucky University. It was my favorite search engine and internet service provider, right? So it says that IP address goes with that local host. So when I put in www.wku.edu, you can go, it'll take you to that IP address, right? So the IP address is really what it tracks. So, but the local host is something easy to remember. So on the internet, when you type in www Google, Google actually relates to the IP address for all Google servers and all Google's servers on their stuff. No, that's cool. I'll help you. I'm in the box. I'm gonna put in Tech G's channel. He actually goes over beginning IT certifications. You can get A plus. You got your A plus. I think it's Foundation and Network Plus. Those are the 3 basic things you need to do to get in IT game over. So are you brand new to IT game over? What's up, Kobe? My pleasure. Thanks for joining us. So once again, the local host relates to the IP address, right? So if we walk through this is going to show you DNS poisoning. So the attacker, what's the address to the evil, right? It sends you to the attacker's IP address. It sends you back with all the evil addresses, 192.168, right? Because the evil in the green took over their network. So it sends you to the valid attacker's address, right? Then if you look at step 4, it looks into the address list once again on a valid DNS server. Since the valid DNS server has not been hacked, it sends back the good address. So on the attacker's DNS server, right, it put the bad address of 192.168.11 right on all those. So basically that tells you if you get into that host setup drive, you can actually change the host name to any bad address or anywhere you want to go, right? So you got to protect those. You got to protect your DNS server from the hackers so they don't give you bad IP addresses. You think you're in the United States, you could be actually going to a server in Russia, right? If they change their IP and you're not paying attention. Because you put in www.goodnet, that could be a bad server somebody set up in Russia or North Korea, right? So a lot of times behind the scenes, if you do an NS lookup, it'll tell you what IP address actually goes with that www, right? You got to match those up. Privilege escalation, access rights, privilege access rights to hardware, software, and resources that are granted to a user. So when you log on to a server, right, it tells you this is the access, this is where you can go, these are the directories you can go into. Privilege escalation, exploiting a software vulnerability to gain access to resources that users normally would be restricted. There's 2 types of privilege escalation. When a lower user function restricted to a higher user function is sometimes called vertical privilege escalation. When a user with restricted privilege access to a different restricted function of a similar user, that's called a horizontal privilege escalation. If I'm on a Linux box and I'm a regular user, if I want to do vertical privilege escalation, right, on that Linux box, I'm going to try to go from a regular user to a power user. Really, I want to become root, right? I actually own the box, right? If I can go from a regular user and vertical privilege escalation to root, right? Root is God on that box. I shouldn't say God on a Sunday, but it actually owns everything on that box, right? Now, if I go from Linux and somehow I jump onto the Oracle database and become a different user on Oracle database, right? I go from Linux and maybe that Linux process actually owns the Oracle database, and I actually create a user on the Oracle database, right? Now that's horizontal privilege escalation, right? I went from a user on Linux to user actually on an Oracle database, right? So now that's horizontal privilege escalation, right? So that's the difference between vertical and privilege escalation. Game over. Right at the end of this, look in the comment section. Look in the description section of this video. Give me an hour. I'm gonna give you Tech G's. He actually has a channel with the starter classes on it. I'm gonna give you Network Bruh. He does beginning networking, and probably Keep It Techie. They have channels with startup, getting people in the beginning IT. All right. So I'm gonna put both of those in the description after the video. So give me like 30 minutes, and after the video is over, game over, I'll put those on. I'll help you, but those guys are already set up. Tech G actually getting people certified on his channel. I just didn't want to duplicate what they were doing. I think those guys are doing great work. So give me a minute. If you look on the tab, you actually see ProfessorBlackOps at gmail.com. So if I slip up and don't get that to you, hit me on my email. I'm sure I will, but sometimes I get busy. Just hit me up, man. My job here is to help you guys get in the industry, man. So I want to do that. And I think those are, I'm going to give you 3 or 4 guys that are starting beginning IT channels, but they're doing different subjects like fundamentals. There's networking, databases. So you can kind of figure out which one of those you like. Game over. I'll make sure I make that happen. So once again, you're going from Linux to Oracle. That would be horizontal privilege escalation. A compromised server can provide threat actors with this privileged content to provide an opening for attacking any of the devices that access the server. So everybody knows when you're on the internet, everything kind of runs on a server, being at a virtual server, a physical server, no SQL server, everything runs on a server at some negotiated part, right? So that's probably the first thing you're going to get attacked from a cybersecurity perspective. You're going to get attacked on a server. Even if the web servers run on a server, the database is running on the server, anything you attack is going to be housed on a server. So typical server attacks include denial of service, web server application attacks, hijacking, overflow attacks, advertising attacks, and exploiting browser vulnerabilities. Right. So all those are different types of server attacks that are going to happen. Denial of service attack, deliberate attempts to prevent authorized users from accessing a system by overwhelming its request. Most DDoS attacks today are distributed denial of service attacks using hundreds of thousands of device flooding the servers with requests. I've actually been on a company that actually got attacked by denial of service. It's weird when you're having a petabyte of information, which is every encyclopedia known to man of information. So what is that doing to your server? It's not hacking the server. What happened is your logs are filling up, your network is congested. You got to once again keep getting logs. Your database is just getting overwhelmed, right? So denial of service, which okay, they're not stealing anything, but if you're a business and you get most of your money in December and somebody do a denial of service attack, you can't connect your money, right? If you're a business and you get most of your money in the first quarter and somebody do a denial of service attack and your servers are down, right? You can't do business. One of my favorite attacks, the Smurf attack, an attacker broadcasts a network request to all the computers on your network, but changes the address from which the request came from, which is called IP spoofing. It appears as if the victim computer is asking for a response from all computers on the network. All the computer sends a response to the victim computer so that it's overwhelmed, right? So if you don't set up your network right, what up? Tiny's in the build on CL. Everybody congratulate him. He just passed the CISP. I'm hoping to interview him maybe Tuesday. Talk about what doors open when you get your CISP. All computers send a response to the victim's computer so that it's overwhelmed. Right, so denial of service attack, once again, it's not like they're on your system, but you can't do work. I feel you. CL trying to get the big bag. I'm trying to keep mine. It's hard out here. DNS amplification attacks. So when I talk to my Cisco guys, my networking guys, the next level is how do you block these type of attacks on your Cisco router, on your Juniper router, right? Or even in your AWS when people, they can do these same attacks on AWS. AWS is pretty cool because you pay a little money. I think they got the DDoS service you can buy for a little more money that'll block all these attacks. But DNS amplification attacks, a flood of victims by redirecting valid response to it, uses publicly accessible and open DNS service to flood a system with DNS response. The SYN flood attacks take advantage of procedures for initiating a session. In a SYN flood attack against a web server, the attacker sends SYN segments in an IP packet to the server. The attacker modifies the source address for each packet to the computer and addresses that do not exist and cannot be reached. Right? So when it sends those messages back to the address that can't be reached, right, it's going to hold those memory spots for that reply. And then if your server don't reply, it's going to run out of memory. Willed in the house. Hi, Professor Attends. I'm very late today, but I'm here from Kent, UK. Shout out to Win from the UK. We're glad you can make it. Just intro to cybersecurity. This is week 5, just going over some networking servers attacks. So that's actually the denial of service attack And I love the picture form of that. So if you send a send attack in an IP packets with the server, you modify the source address so it doesn't exist. So you see all those packets waiting for reply. You're gonna run out of memory if you don't clear those up while it's waiting for computer A that doesn't exist, B, C, D, and E. Right? You change and put a fake IP address. Now that server's gonna run out of memory. Right? So that's the send attack, and that's what it actually looks like. The cool thing though, if you're using Cisco Juniper, one of the big servers, they actually have modules in that's going to actually handle that for you and drop those IP packets, because Cisco's smart enough to know these are all the IPs in my segments, right? These segments don't exist on my network, right? So I'm gonna drop those packets. I know it's an attack. So when you get Cisco, one of the big firms that's built in, they're actually going to handle that for you. So web server is probably the first part where people are actually going to attack you as a corporation. We always talk about our outward facing web servers, right? These are outward facings our clients can get to from the outside on the internet. But if the clients can get to them, what adversaries can get to them, Russia, bad actors, script kiddies, right? So everybody can get to those outward facing. So those are the ones you have to lock down, hopefully the first and the tightest. Securing web application is more difficult than protecting other servers. 0-day attack, an attack that exploits previously unknown vulnerabilities victims have not time to prepare for or defend against. Traditional network security devices can block traditional network attacks, but cannot always block web application attacks. So from a 0-day point is most of your virus protection is pattern matching. I've seen this virus before, so I know the pattern of it. 0-day means that pattern has not been seen and the vendors don't know how to block it. Right, so your adversaries, when they test their viruses and their malware, they have the same virus protection software you have. So they're going to test it to make sure there's 0 days. But when you spend more money or buy some of the more complex virus protection, they have something called behavioral patterns and artificial intelligence. So even if they don't know that pattern, it says that pattern looks similar to this other virus pattern, I'm gonna go ahead and quarantine it, right? Or I'm gonna notify you that this could be a virus, right? So virus companies are getting better. They have better pattern matching, better artificial intelligence. But if you buy basic virus protection, it's going to be pattern matching. I've seen this pattern. I've seen this virus. This is the pattern, right? I know what I need to do. We talked about traditional network service can block many network service devices ignore content on HTTP traffic or even HTTPS. That's 80 or 443. That's common. So if I'm getting attacked on 80, that looks just like regular network web traffic. All right. Several different web application attacks targets the input from users and group into 2 categories: cross-site attacks and injection attacks. So this is a standard. We call it a 3-tier architecture. Most companies use this form in some way, even in AWS, even in Azure. You're going to have 3-tiered and you're going to kind of bounce it off of there. So you see your client doing your web traffic to your web server. That if you're using Java, that's Apache. If you're a Windows shop, that's going to be IIS. If you can be an app server and a database from an app server, once again, you can put IIS. I'm a Tomcat guy because I do Java. And database, there's a ton of them out there. SQL Server, Oracle, MongoDB, MySQL, right? But that's the standard 3-tier architecture that you're going to have at a small company and even a large company. Instead of having 3 app servers, you can have 40 or 50. Usually you can have, 2 or 3 databases with a master slave for failover. Of course, your master will be clustered. So you have it 3 different clusters in there in case one goes down locally. It'll flow over. That app server, hopefully there's 3, looks like 3 racks in there. So hopefully that's a load balance between those 3 in case one goes down. But that's your standard 3-tier architecture. One of the first attacks on a web server is Crosssite Scripting. A threat actor takes advantage of a web application and accepts user input without validating it before presenting back to user. So the key thing in there is you want to validate all your input coming into your web server. You want to work with your development team. You want to make sure they're validating that. When victims visit injected website, malicious instructions are sent to the victim's browsers. Some cross-site scripting attacks are designed to steal information and retained by the browser when visiting a specific site. Cross-site scripting attack requires website meets 2 criteria: accept user input without validating it, and user input in a response. Right, so we want to validate all input coming in, and when we send out our response, even coming out our infrastructure and our database, we still want to validate that. This is where I'm at on the forum on security. I'm doing self studies, very interesting. That's cool, Wilton. Good luck. I'm gonna go through these, and I'm hoping to make these slides available. So that's gonna be my next move. I'm getting them ready. But Wilton, if you have any thoughts, let me know. And like I said, Tiny always gonna help me, so I got Tiny on board. He'll help me. So this just shows you cross-site attack. The user put the data in, then the bookmark pages accept the user. So what that's showing you is they're not validating any of that information. So whatever you put in actually comes out the other side. So that's what that's showing. That's not a good deal. So if we come in, we should never let anybody send it straight through. We should validate it, bookmark it, strip out the HTML code. So that's why that site will be available to cross-site scripting. We're going to have a CL on just to talk about what the CISP is kind of opening up for him, kind of recruiters. We work together, so I could just see him growing as a security person. So I'm going to make him do all the work now at work because he's CISP. So I'm old. I'm going to take a little break, Wilton, but keep grinding, keep getting more security certifications. Crosssite Request Forgery. The attacker uses the user's web browser setting to impersonate the user. If the user is currently authenticating a website, it is tricked into loading another web page. The new page inherits the identity and privilege of the victim to perform an undesired function. Right, so I think it's going to show that in there. So Crosssite Request Forgery is always in the top 20 for web application hits and how attackers are actually getting in there. So this is going to walk through the Crosssite Attack. The attacker forges a fund transfer request from Bank A and embeds it into an email link. The attacker sends the email to the victim who's logged in to a Bank A's website. The victim unknowingly clicks an email link. For a request is sent to Bank A with the victim's verified credentials. Bank A validates the request with the victim's credentials and sends the funds request to the attacker back to 1, right? Because remember, he fudged the email, so when the victim clicked on it, his credentials his bank account got put in there with the victim's credentials on it, right? So that's the process. Crosssite Request Forgery, right? Definitely one of the questions usually on SecurityPlus. So let's talk about injection attacks. That's one of the many attacks that are available. Injection attack introduce new input to exploit a vulnerability. One of the most common injection attacks called SQL Injection insert statements to manipulate a database server. SQL used to view and manipulate data stored in a relational database. Forgotten password An attacker enters a fictitious email address that includes a single quotation marked as part of the data. The response lets the attacker know where the input is being validated. The attacker enters email field in the SQL statement. Right, so in this ejection, I can actually manipulate the SQL inside a web server to give me extra data back than it should. I can make this web server send me back everybody's username and password. I can make it send me back everybody's, hopefully, account number. So if you say the statement is processed, you can see select from table where whatever, and he added where A equals A. That results all user email address will be displayed. So where A equals A was added, so that means every line record of that will come back true. So it will bring all those records back to the database. Oh, that's a good idea. I'll probably do that, Tiny. So this shows you forgot your email. You put your username and your email address in there. Then when you put it in there, you can add as emails num, determine if there's a different field in the database. If you add where select count discovers the name of the table. So these are stuff you can add into that original screen. If you add these select statements into that original screen, you can determine the name of the table, find specific users, erase the database if you drop table, mail the password to attacker's email account. All right, so there's different things you can put inside that web screen to actually make it do SQL attacks in the back end. So that's what it's showing you how to do. Hijacking several servers attacks are the results of threat actors commandeering a technology and then using it attack for an attack. Common hijacks include session hijacking, URL hijacking, domain hijacking, and click hijacking. So when you talk about hijacking is what? I'm going to hijack that information. I'm going to hijack that session. I'm going to hijack that website, right? So that's where all the hijacking attacks come from. So a session hijacks attempts to impersonate a user by stealing or guessing a session. Session token is a random string assigned to an interaction between a user and a web account. Attacker can attempt to obtain a session token by using Crosssite Scripting or other attacks to steal a session token cookie, eavesdropping on transmission, or trying to guess the session token. Guessing the session token is super hard because they're about 50 characters long, but so this shows you URL hijacking. A user is directed to a fake lookalike site filled by ads for which the attacker receives money for generating the site. Attacker purchases the domain name sites that are spelled similar than the actual site. Threat actors also register the domain names that are one bit different, called bit squatting. So that shows you the G to F, right, for Google. If I change that one bit, it's called Google. So if somebody actually types with an F and misspell Google, they'll go to my website and it'll actually look like the original Google, right? And I can attack them and, steal their searches or steal their event. So one of the other ones that are called is domain hijacking. Occurs when a domain pointer that links a domain to a specific website is changed by a threat actor. When a domain is hijacked, a threat actor gains access to the domain control panel and redirects to the registered domain to a physical different server. Right, so when you have a server, you have the server name, Google, Amazon, but that's actually related to a physical IP address. Right, so if I can go on Google and change that IP address, right, that instead of going to their servers, it'll go to my server. Right, then I can steal their information or make a fake website that looks like theirs that actually steal all their information. So that's kind of where you go with domain hijacking. Click hijacking is a mouse click. The user is tricked into clicking a link that other than what it appears. Clickjacking often relies upon threat actor using a 0 pixel and iframe. is an HTML element that allows for embedding another HTML. A 0-pixel iframe is virtually invisible to the naked eye. That's why a lot of people block iframes on actual websites just because of that. People can put 0 clicks in there and steal your information. An overflow attack, design to overflow areas of memory with instructions from the attacker. The two types are buffer overflow or integer overflow. Right, so those are different types of attacks, different types of ways to make things happen. So a buffer overflow occurs when an attempt to store data in RAM beyond its fixed length storage buffer. Extra data overflows into the adjacent memory location. Attacker can overflow the buffer with a new address pointing to the attacker's malware. So here's that. So that's the normal process at the top. But if I overflow the buffer with the return address, I can make it jump to the malware in the overflow segment, which is there in the green. So at the top, so part of stopping buffer overflow is validating your input, right? The social security number is only so big, an address is only so big, right? So all those segments as they come in with those normal segment blocks, I need to validate whatever data is going in there is not bigger than those segments, right? So that would be the actual point of validating data. So as part of security, we got to make sure the development team is doing what they're supposed to do and make sure they're doing validations. There's Burp Sweep is a popular one, and OWASP Zap. And of course, we're going to do some videos on that to validate that. But those are some open source tools that will help you validate buffer overflow and that the development team is doing what they're supposed to do. Integer overflow is a condition that occurs when result in an arithmetic operation exceeds the maximum number of integer type used to store it. An attack changes the value of a variable, something outside the programmer had intended. And an integer overflow. An integer is a certain size field, right? If you're doing Java or C# and it's an integer, it's going to be a certain size field. This attack could be used for the following situation. The attacker can use an integer overflow attack to create a buffer flow over situation. A program that calculates the total cost of item purchase would use the number cost of units sold, the cost per unit. If an integer overflow were introduced, it could result in a negative value and result in a negative total cost. A large positive value in a bank transfer could wrap around to an integer overflow to become a negative value. So if you Google that, actually, when Amazon was first created, a lot of people were using integer overflow attacks. So if the item cost $100, they would make it wrap around and make the item cost $1. So Amazon had a ton of issues with that when they first came out, right? So these attacks have been used a number of times. The crazy part about it is the past always comes back in the future. You got a lot of companies that are trying to get to market, and they're not putting the right security features in place to stop a lot of these. So when you see a new company, a lot of that stuff still comes up. Several attack attempts used for ads or manipulate advertisement. Malvertisement is a malware in advertisement and ad fraud. Third actors use third-party advertising networks to distribute malware as unsuspecting users visit a well-known site known as malvertisement or poison ad attack. The ad contains malware directed to a visitor's site who receives it. The attacker's web page then downloads the Trojan and ransomware onto his computers. To prevent malvertisement, the website owners are unaware of the types of ads that are being displayed. User has a false sense of security going to a mainstream website. Turning off ads that support plugins such as Adobe Flash often disrupts the user's web experience. So once again, people with ads, and we always try to tell users, if you don't know where this ad came from, do not click on this link, right? And the part in there that's huge is that you see every day is That's how ransomware gets started. We see ransomware every week. We see a ransomware attack every week. That's somebody clicking on an ad. All right. Somebody click on an ad, then your network, and boom. Oh, facts, tiny money, giveaways, free here, like boom. Fraud threat actors manipulate pre-roll ads to earn revenue that is directed back to them. The attackers have created a robo browser called Mechabot that spoofs all the necessary interactive need to initiate, carry out, and complete all ad actions. Right. So there's robots out there that actually click on ads or click on stuff for you, right, to help you carry out that for fake ad options. Right. There's some out there for something for everybody to, you know, get on, get attacked. We talked about the browser vulnerabilities earlier. I'm sure I'm gonna do a stream probably with Tiny. We're gonna talk about the SIGs for Explorer, what you need to block, what you need to let on. I think there's 40 or 50 checks for a web browser to make sure it's locked down. Shout out to the blue team locking down everything. Script code, add dynamic contents. Web browser download scripts or a series of instructions in the form of computer code that commands the browser to perform a specific function. One of the most popular ones, and I do a ton of, is JavaScript. JavaScript instruction embedded in HTML. There are different defense mechanisms intended to prevent JavaScript programs from causing serious harm. However, there are security concerns. A malicious JavaScript could capture and remotely transmit users' information without their knowledge or backend. Right, so you got to be get with the JavaScript. Usually, we try to sign the JavaScript so we know it's good, and it has to be signed by the security team or the programmer to make sure that we trust that specific JavaScript and it just wasn't downloaded from some random place. Right. The hard thing is you get a lot of developers. They like to download these little widgets that they find all over the internet. The security team's got to validate those. We don't know where you got it from. We don't know who signed up on it. We don't know who to trust. Right. So you got to watch those JavaScripts. Right. Extensions expanding normal capabilities of a web browser from our specific page. Most extensions are written in JavaScript so the browser can support dynamic actions. Extensions are browser dependent. Extension that works in Chrome will not function in Microsoft Edge. So that's one thing. But there are a lot of Java libraries because I'm a Java guy. Java script libraries that are running all browsers, and they're cross-platform dependent in that. So there's a ton of those. Plugins adds new functionality to a web browser so users can play music, videos, or display graphical images. A single plugin can be used on different web pages. One common plugin supports Java, can be used to create specific programs called a Java applet. Those aren't used hardly anymore. Java applet is a super old technology. And one of most widely used is Java, Adobe Flash. Apple just killed Adobe Flash, Apple QuickTime, and Adobe Acrobat Reader. Adobe Acrobat Reader still used, but the top three, those actually been kind of killed off because they had a lot of security problems. So what would that look like when you talk about the web server, going with your browser, with your Java applet? So on your HTML page, when you go to the page, the Java applet, the user actually pulls it from their web browser. That user actually, it's usually some weird image or some meme or graphic that's running. That's what the Java applet is for. So it pulls it down to your browser, right? So if this is coming from an unknown website, that Java applet that gets pulled down to your server could be malware or ransomware. That's what I would worry about most. Malware and ransomware. Now, I'm selling web servers are getting encrypted and they're not working, right? So add-ons, a great degree of functionality to the browser, create additional browser toolbars, browser menus, beware of browsers due to the risk associated with extension plugins and add-ons. Efforts be made to minimize them. Web browsers now block plugins, HTML5 standardized sound and video, so that plugins like Flash are no longer needed. So the last part of that is the huge part. HTML5 makes a lot of stuff standard, so you don't have to use those plugins. You don't have to do any special downloads. So that's why HTML5 was so important. So once again, this shows you the difference between extensions, plugins, and add-ons. It's not a big thing. Extensions written in JavaScript has a wider access to privileges. Plugins links to external programs, add-ons, or functionalities in browser itself, right? So those are just different things that developers use. Remember, most of the things that are being attacked on your website is actually going to come in through your web page, right? Your web server. That's going to be the first attack to where people are coming in, right? So that's something short I just want to hit everybody up with. Take about an hour, just go over chapter 5 of Introduction to Computer Security. Like I said, we're going to start doing more technical stuff in the introduction. My Tiny wants to go over MITRE, so we'll do that. We're still going to do I do a lot of STIG videos, which is how do you harden different devices from a security perspective. And the big thing I'm going to start a series on is federal compliance. That's what me and CL does. How do you do federal compliance? How do you get in the world of federal? How do you get the federal bag? Being DOD, IRS, OSHA, HIPAA, looking at cloud vendors for federal improvement. How does all that lay down? I have a question regarding cookies. Do the GDPR users are fronted with the website dialog to confirm they agree and accept and comply with cookies? But I'm just scared about that. Yeah, but actually, I wouldn't do a cookie. I would actually do a physical web page. And inside that web page, I would just save your acceptance, which is similar to a cookie, and just save it to a database. I got you. Look in the description box. Game over. I'm gonna put those in the. I'm gonna put those 4 guys in the description box to have those intro entries to IT. Like I said, I don't want to recreate what those guys are doing. I think Tech G probably be leading the pack of that, so I'm gonna put him first. Game over. He actually has videos to get you ready for fundamentals, A plus, and Network plus. Those are the 3 I think you need to get into the IT game and to get you started. What's up, Maddox? Man, I'm glad Maddox came. Let's see, Tiny got a winch. So yeah, so I'll put those in the box. Welcome, Maddox. We're just wrapping up, man. I just went over, checked the restream. I just did security attacks and beginning network for SecurityPlus. Yeah, game over. I'll give you those 4 guys. And like I said, I don't want to recreate what Tech G's doing. Keep It Techie. Kev Tech does help desk. I'm gonna put those 5 guys in the description. Like I said, that's gonna get you started in IT. Maddox is definitely a good resource. He's on everybody's on everybody's stream, so he's definitely a good resource. But yeah. But I'm gonna put those 4 in the description box. Give me about 30 minutes and look in there. Like I said, if not, look at my community tab. You'll see ProfessorBlackOps at gmail.com. But I'm gonna get that over to you. Maddox knows all those guys. Like I said, I don't want to recreate what Tech G's doing. I think his channel is great at getting people in the introduction to computer. Kev Tech, just killer guy on help desk. Sub-Zero, getting you in the databases. All those guys, channels. Like I said, I don't want to recreate those guys. I want to really add to what those guys are doing. Like I said, we all in the kind of the manosphere. We all working. We all in the technology. And since they're doing a great job, I don't want to create it. I think I've been thinking I'm gonna have Tiny probably help me. I'm gonna start doing at a higher level how to get into federal compliance and get on federal sites and get federal money. Once you get your background check, how do you do that type of work, and how do you get in that game and get that bag? Shout out to the real estate. Me and CL, we talk real estate on the side. But yeah, game over. I get that. Like I said, Maddox is knows all those guys. And like I said, I thought about it. I don't want to recreate what any of those guys are doing and stepping on those guys' toes. So I'm going to put those in the description box. That's all I got, fellas. I'm gonna wrap it up. And I'm give me 30 minutes, game over. I'm gonna get that out to you. I'm taking a note. I'm old. I gotta take a note. I'm gonna get that out there. Thank everybody for coming. This is gonna be my normal time for introduction to computer security. We're gonna go over some of the basic tasks. Like I said, and those guys, I'm a funnel introduction guys to those other channels. Everybody have a great weekend. Monday's almost here. Let's keep grinding. Let's get this knowledge. Let's get the bag. Yeah, Maddox. I see you on panel. Yeah, Maddox definitely in the mix, man. I probably have to interview him on my channel. All good. I thank everybody for coming. Everybody have a good weekend. Give me 30 minutes, game over, and look in the description. I'm going to do it in 30 minutes. It might take YouTube a minute to flush it out there and get in there, but I'm going to get those channels in there ASAP. Everybody have a great weekend.